You are listening to the Social Hotelier Show, a podcast that inspires hoteliers to create meaningful and memorable experiences for their customers in pursuit of their passion. We share our views and experiences relating to hospitality, technological trends, and also relating to humanity. Here is your host, Sam-Erik Rutman.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik Rutman. What company principles should you follow to grow your business? A company that successfully created a customer-focused business and is a household name. Well, I'm sure you have heard about this company, but more importantly, I met some time ago Steve Anderson, who's an expert and a keynote speaker, and he's the international best-selling author of Bezos Letters, the 14 principles to grow your business like an Amazon. So we will probe into these principles today. So warm welcome, Steve, and thanks for joining us today.
Sam-Erik, it's my pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation.
So let's start right away because we have some interesting principles that we want to cover with Amazon and Bezos Letters. First of all, I'm curious, considering that you were reading the letters to shareholders, and I have read few, and I found them mostly a lot of financial information. But how did you start reading particularly the Bezos Letters, and then you found a lot of value and golden nuggets in there that then resulted in that you wrote a book about this?
Exactly, and so my background is in the insurance industry. Early on, selling insurance. Later, helping independent insurance agents here in the United States with their technology. So all kinds of different things there. And I think everybody knows and understands, even more so today, that technology continues to develop very rapidly. And so I started asking the question, is the biggest risk insurance agents face, and I've since broadened that to businesses, is the biggest risk they face actually not taking enough risk? And so I started researching and looking at companies that were once very successful and literally are gone. They're out of business. And companies that have been successful and continue to be successful. And I started trying to find out, okay, what's the difference? Why did these succeed and these didn't ultimately long term? In that, as kind of you said, I came across Amazon. I would say now kind of no surprise, I think, and looked at them as an example of a company that has been successful and actually continues to be successful. And that's when I came across the shareholder letters. And kind of as you said, yeah, some of them, here's how I look at it. Most shareholder letters, and those are documents that typically CEOs write for public companies about the company. And most of the time, they tout the company, the great things they've done, financial success, those kinds of things. And Bezos certainly did some of that. But I think what really intrigued me and caught my attention is that as I read the letters, and the first one was 1997, the last one I looked at in the book was 2018. He subsequently wrote 19 and 20, and then he stepped down as CEO. But I realized there were threads that went through those letters, and he did more than tout financial success and how great the company is. He talked about how they got there or how they think. And I think that's what caught my attention, those threads that really pretty consistent, not every letter, but throughout the letters. And those are the principles that I put together and then wrote about in the book.
Well, of course, it's to my no surprise that you have written a book about it. But I'm just thinking, have you written other books, or what kind of inspired you to actually write a book, particularly about this fascinating topic?
Yeah. So no, I haven't written another book, although I have a couple ideas for some books that I might be writing now. And actually, I never intended to write a book. That's probably the best way to say it. I had taken the letters that had been published so far, and actually created a one-page, what I called executive summary of the letter, kind of key points in the letter and key takeaways that I think, in my first case, agencies could look at and apply to their own business. And that I was going to give that away as a ebook, a free lead gen. Here's some good stuff. Give me your email address, get on my list, etc. And I would say, fortunately, my wife is in the book publishing business, has been for many years. And I talked to her about this, showed her what I put together, and she looked at it. And she also sent it to the founder of the publishing company she works for. And they both came back immediately and said, this is a book. And so that started a journey. And I do believe my thoughts at that time was, oh, crap, I don't know how to write a book. And I've written throughout my career, but articles. And there's a real difference between 1,000 or 1,500 word article and what ended up being a 65,000 word book. And so that was for me, 18 plus month, process. And I will say, Karen, my wife, she's on the cover as a co-author, was instrumental in helping me put my thoughts and ideas and principles into a book that was readable and approachable and would help people. So it really was a collaboration. And I do get the question often, yes, we still are married.
Well, that's a great story, and also something for all of us who are in communicating, and we are giving tips and tricks about how to excel in businesses or what we do. And then we have this dream of, well, let me write a book and then get on the New York Times bestseller list or whatnot. And really, you're so right. You cannot do it alone. You need somebody to. And I think you're so fortunate that your wife Karen is the pro in the family
Yes,
who knows how.
I am very fortunate. And people ask me, how did that work? And I said, it worked actually pretty well, because if she said it did, something didn't work, I trusted her implicitly. She knows books, I don't. And so it was a great collaboration.
Excellent. So Jeff Bezos has offered several unique insights and teachings in the realm of the management that have inspired others. So maybe we can dig into a few key concepts that you like to talk about. So maybe we can start. I'll give you one. One of my favorites is actually customer obsession, coming from hospitality. So maybe we can start with that, and then we go down the list of what you like to speak about.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And let me put a little context around the principles. 14 is a lot, and we knew that at the beginning. And so we grouped them into 4 cycles. And I believe any business, I don't care what it is always going through these cycles. So test, build, accelerate, and scale. And so the 14 principles fit into those 4 cycles. So the customer obsession fits into the second cycle called build. And the idea here, I was so intrigued with this concept, kind of like you, right? So any business knows they need to take care of their customers. I mean, that that from the beginning. You don't have customers, you don't have a business. But Bezos used the word obsession, will obsess over customers. And he used that in that very first 1997 letter. And there were several different sections in that letter. And one of those is, we will obsess over customers. And, that word can have negative connotations, like you're too obsessed, right? And in business, can you be too obsessed with your customer? And so certainly we talk about customer service and customer journey and customer focus, but when you obsess over customers, it's a different mindset. And the way it's thought of at Amazon is they know their customers' wants, needs, and desires so deeply that they can invent on their behalf. So they don't rely on focus groups typically, because people don't know what they want if they don't know it's available. But if you understand your customers so deeply that you can anticipate what they would want if they knew it was available. And I think that's the core idea behind it. Um, and the other aspect of it is at Amazon, there's a process called working backwards. So you work backwards from the customer to a product, service, platform, service that you think will resonate with them, even if they never knew they needed it or wanted it. Um, so yeah, and I think that's a really it, it, for a hotel, a hospitality, for any business, thinking about what you could do to delight your customers, I think is the the focus behind this particular principle.
Yeah. I mean, one of the key thoughts I get out of it is the driving innovation. And there are so many companies that they're thinking they are, the way they're looking at innovation is basically they're waiting for the customer to tell them, what do you need? And I will provide it for you. So it's very sort of that kind of things. But someone like Amazon and maybe Apple for that matter, they were innovators. So they kind of realized that before the customer really knew what they wanted, they already came up with something new, and then, oh, here's one more thing, and then they came up, and everybody put their hands together, are applauding to that innovation. I think that's so inspiring that, and they must be thinking a lot continuously in order to make that business grow.
Yes, they do, and I want to add a little wrinkle to that thought in that Bezos talks a lot about inventing on behalf of the customer. And so, and that first cycle called test, one of the principles there is called encourage successful failure. So I would say your example, Amazon certainly, I would say Apple, they actually invented something new. The phone, mobile phone wasn't new, but the iPhone was. And again, it was customer focused. What would customers want? And most of the phones prior to that were business focused, not consumer focused. And so I actually think there's too much talk about innovation and not enough talk about invention. What's the next thing that is going to resonate with customers? And you certainly innovate, right? So when you invent, and Amazon has invented all kinds of stuff, and they invent, they invent and then they innovate. But in order to invent, you've got to experiment. And in order to experiment, you've got to be willing to suffer failures.
Yeah.
Because as Bezos says, if you're doing an experiment and you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment,
Yeah,
right?
that's very well said.
So failure's a part of what has to happen in order to build something that resonates with customers.
Oh, excellent. I mean, this is almost a whole episode we can talk about this obsession, but then maybe we can move on
Yes.
to. I had my second on my list was, I don't know if that's in the beginning or number two, but the first day mentality.
Yeah, day one is and it is a mindset. You know, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
And it literally started in that first 1997 letter where Bezos says it's day one for the internet. Now remember, 1997, the internet, people still didn't know what it was, still had no idea what it would become. Bezos had the ability to look into the future and say, okay, this is going to be something important. And so I need to pay attention to it. But what he said is, you know, it's day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. That phrase showed up in every single letter he wrote, usually at the end, where he would say something like, it's still day one, it continues to be day one. And day one is the concept of being a startup. Walking in,
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a 20-year-old or 50-year-old company, but walking in the business, opening the door, thinking this is the first day in business. And, you know, the excitement that has, the push to help customers and being day one is really core. And Bezos was asked at an all hands meeting quite a few years later, Jeff, what does day two look like? And he kind of laughed, and he said, day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And honestly, if you look back at some of those companies that I didn't mention names, but BlackBerry and Blockbuster and Kodak and Sears and Kmart and all kinds of different companies of all kinds of different types, that was the process. Now, he said it could take 20 years or more, but once you start down that path of protecting what got us here and not continuing to invent what's next, then they're in trouble. And so that's why day one was such an important concept for Bezos and at Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, my takeaway really is that this kind of helps to avoid complacency in so many ways, that you really have to, and that is quite easy, that once things are going well, it's quite easy to say, well, things are going well, let's celebrate this. But in fact, you have to be so extremely hungry.
Yes.
And have that day one mentality.
Yep.
And
yeah, and that's exactly right. And I think the way he sees it, also that complacency, I think, is key, because when you get to a certain level of success as a company, you tend to get complacent and just start protecting, what got you there, not looking at what's next. And that's fine for a while until all of a sudden it's not, and then it's too late for you to shift and change.
Yeah. Well, the number 3 I have here is high velocity decision making. Could you speak about that?
I can. So again, what happens at a company as they get successful, as they grow, as they scale, they tend to build bureaucracy, meaning they tend to take decision making and move it up behind layers of management. And Bezos says that's not the way to continue to grow. So he describes high velocity decision making as doors, one-way door and two-way doors, and type 1 decisions and type 2 decisions. So type 1 decisions, every company makes, they are decisions that kind of what I call bet the company decisions. They're big decisions. They have significant impact on the company and typically are not reversible. So it might be a merger, an acquisition. It could be a number of things. And he says those kinds of decisions should be made slowly, with lots of data, and ultimately with gut intuition from a small group of highly capable people. But he says the problem is those decisions are few and far between. But companies tend to build type 1 decisions into their culture when they don't need to. So type 2 decisions are a two-way door, meaning you can make a decision, move forward, and they are easier to reverse. He describes it this way: as you walk through that door and don't like what you see on the other side of that decision, you can walk back, stop the decision, cancel it. You could pivot to something else or something different, but you can move faster. So he says on type 2 decisions, you should make those decisions with at most 70% of the information you wish you had. Not that you have, but you wish you had. And they should be made by a small group of highly capable people who can make that decision, are skilled in that particular area. And so those decisions happen all the time. And so at Amazon, they work really hard at keeping layers of decision making small. And they did build some processes in there to help with those decisions, help make those decisions better and faster, which helps them grow faster.
So this also means basically that they are encouraging more experimentation and faster implementation.
Yes.
but then there are certain decisions that you take your time, you get enough data, and those are far between before you make that decision.
Correct.
So
And it really,
yeah,
again,
yeah,
and that really is an illustration of how the principles stand on their own, but they also interact with one another. And so
yeah,
the encourage experimentation is that encourage successful failure. Try it out, and decisions, those type two decisions are typically smaller decisions that, yeah, it may not be great, but it doesn't hurt that bad. And I want to say here, when I talk about encourage successful failure, this is not willy nilly, let's throw something against the wall, see if it sticks. This is
yeah,
thoughtful, purposeful, strategic decision making, not just who cares. So, in fact, the phrase I use is that Amazon has an intolerance for incompetence. So, if you make bad decisions over and over again, you won't be there very long.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so maybe we can talk about embracing failure and experimentation. No, I know we have touched that already, but maybe because that's it's a very difficult concept for so many companies and also hotels and embracing failure because they want to be kind of 99% sure whatever they do is money well
Yep,
spent.
exactly. Well, and again, I've mentioned encourage successful failure, and kind of another corollary principle there that's again tied together in this test cycle is practice dynamic invention and innovation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at Amazon, literally every employee is encouraged to think about how to improve whatever process procedure that they are involved with personally. And so they don't have separate research and development departments. The employees are the research and development, and they bring ideas forward. Now, again, that ties back into the decision making. Somebody has a better way to do something, they can bring that forward, and often they'll be charged with the responsibility of actually implementing that. And kind of the third one in that test cycle, which I think is important, is bet on big ideas. So again, all of these are kind of worked in together to create a mindset that experimenting is okay. And here's the problem, again, with other companies, and maybe the hotel has this problem. If somebody has an idea and they try it out and it doesn't work, what are the consequences? You see, I'm convinced that employees aren't afraid of failure, but they are afraid of the consequences of failure. Meaning, are they going to get dinged? Are they going to get, not getting a promotion? What's going to happen? And too often, that's the mindset which just squashes that creativity and that willingness to try something new to see if it might work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is through my career in hotels, that is exactly the approach that everybody's playing safe.
Right.
And when we try to implement social media and we didn't do our homework properly, we just assigned somebody to who, as we call someone who was, we know that she was very good at on social media on a personal level, but we didn't give her proper training and to how we could experiment using social media in the early days. We realized that wasn't very successful, and then suddenly the blame is put on somebody because there was so much time spent. But I think the whole mindset that which is so important to promote a culture of experimentation that gives a freedom for all the smart brains that there are in the whole organization to be involved in that
Yep.
and also celebrate successes.
And who's the best person to understand it? Typically, the one kind of in the midst of what's happening. Maybe
Yeah,
somebody at the front desk, maybe even somebody cleaning rooms
yeah,
can find a better way or do something different. And if they don't feel they have a voice, you'll never know how those improvements could be, very beneficial to the
yeah.
guest and to the hotel.
Very good. So I hear through what you're speaking is that there's a long-term thinking in
Yeah.
Amazon, and maybe you can talk about that principle and the emphasis from Bezos in his letters and the way he was running the company.
Yes. So again, back to that 1997 letter, and as you can tell, I keep going back to that letter because it really is pivotal. And an interesting point is that 1997 letter, Bezos attached to every single letter subsequent, meaning he always made some comment. As always, I attached the original 1997 letter because it was foundational to his thinking. One of those sections, I mentioned there were several. One was customer obsession. Another was this idea of long-term thinking. And he basically what he said is, at Amazon, we will make decisions based on long-term business growth, not short-term Wall Street expectations. And that tends to be how a lot of businesses operate, is quarter to quarter, not
Yeah.
year to year or decade to decade. And so that long-term thinking allows Amazon to invest in things that don't work yet, but might work in the future. And I would say all kinds of different examples, of that idea. I mean, even right now, they're investing in a grocery store, trying to develop what is what Amazon could do differently in grocery stores. They're looking at healthcare, pharmacy. They're experimenting with all kinds of different things, and they're willing to make those long-term investments. So early on, this long-term thinking led Bezos to reinvest profits for probably the first 10, 12, 15 years back into the company to build their fulfillment network, meaning warehouses and the ability to deliver packages in 2 days or less. People were complaining a lot that he was spending too much money building this out. But now Amazon really has a moat around that delivery idea, and they have changed how you and I think about ordering online and expectations for when that package or product arrives at our porch. So
Yeah.
really key. And I would say, again, here in the U.S. with Wall Street expectations of quarterly earnings, they do it because it's required. They talk about it, but they don't focus on it, and they always are focusing multi quarters or multi years forward. And let me give you one more example, if I may. Kind of part of Bezos, he started a space company in the early 2000s called Blue Origin. And to me, that is such a great example of long term thinking. Blue Origin, and he's personally funded it throughout those years, not Amazon. He's personally funded Blue Origin with the idea that he believes people need to and will go to space, and actually manufacturing will be moved from the Earth into space. What's interesting is he was valedictorian of his high school graduating class in Miami, Florida. His valedictorian speech was exactly that concept. So think about that. High school senior thinking about space, intrigued with Star Trek and all the things going on culturally, but willing to think long term and invest long term. And their latest project now is Project Kuiper, which is putting satellites up for internet access anywhere, similar to what Elon Musk has done with SpaceX. That that literally was at least 2 decades of long-term thinking and willingness to invest in a vision that now starting to come to fruition.
Very interesting. Uh, any other any? This was my list. I just wonder whether you like to add anything on to because you know them all. If there's something that you could add, put the kind of round up this the principles for the audience.
So I will pick one from Accelerate. We talked about high velocity decisions. The other one I'll just mention briefly is called Make Complexity Simple. And I still remember where I was when this thought came to me. I was in my car driving somewhere, listening to an interview on the radio with the one of the CEOs of a drugstore company here in the United States, and it was literally a day after the announcement of Amazon acquiring a company called PillPack. So it was an online pharmacy. Details don't matter. Um, and the CEO was being asked about Amazon's acquisition, getting into the pharmacy business. And his comment was, I'm not really concerned about Amazon getting into the pharmacy business because it's more complicated than they realize. And I remember saying out loud, yeah, but that's what Amazon does. They make the complex simple. I mean, think about that in terms of their website, in terms of going online, in terms of finding product, in terms of getting those boxes to your front door. They make a complex process simple to the consumer, at least, right? So, again, that's part making complexity simple. So, how in your business, how at the hotel can you make complexity simple? And the phrase I like to use for you to think about is, where are the friction points that a hotel guest coming experiences? Do you even know them? Do you have secret shoppers, right? People coming to experience what happens at the hotel to help you identify areas where you might want to streamline processes, to not to um, what do I want to say? Not to not engage with the customer, but engage with them where they want to engage and where it's adding value to the guest.
Yeah, very good. Oh, okay, so you know those principles so well, and I was wondering, since you are a businessman, you have your own company. Are there some principles that you have applied to your own business you'd like to share, just to give a flavor of how you went about it? Because you took 1.5 years to write a book, and then you know the how Bezos managed his company. And on your side, what have you? What are the things that you have implemented for your company?
So I actually started a company. Long story, but I've been consulting pretty much on my own for many years, and started a company that took my consulting practice, ideas, processes, and scaled them. And so that particular company, um, I the principles are infused, I guess is how I would say it, from the very first decision making to customer obsession. The phrase I use is, we do what's best for the agent. And that's the filter that we look at everything we're building and developing. Is it best for the agent? How can we make it easier and simpler? And so we've even created, again, that make complexity simple. We've created some tools to help them actually select different kinds of technology that they might want to use and implement, uh, by answering a few questions, and then we help that guide them to the vendors that we think are most appropriate for what they're looking for. So, and it's, again, it's a continual. Here's what I'll say: it's a continue. I don't want to call it a battle, but it's a continual reminder to keep those ideas in mind as you're going through, because it is, it's the world wants to push you into, you know, um, entropy and not let you continue to go, and you need to continue to fight that trend of getting complacent, and that's a day-to-day type of process.
Yeah, very good. So, as many of my listeners, we love technology here in the Social Hotelier. I talk about it quite often. I interview guests who are experts in their field, and because we all believe that the only way to keep up with the new demand of travelers is to keep up with the latest and the greatest, as we can call it. It has been from self check-in digital concierges, and keyless entries. And many of these ideas came up. They were available, but you only started to see them during the pandemic. And I'm just curious to get your view on automation in hotels, because there's a people talk about no, we don't like automation at all, but we need to have some. So do you think this is the way of the future? And particularly when you think about from how Amazon implemented it to make it so personal, so human, what are sort of the automation? Is it good or not? And why isn't it? Or why is it?
So over the years, I've traveled a lot. I've stayed in a lot of different hotels, a lot of flights, a lot of all of that. And so I think it's good. And I'm going to give you two experiences. One recently, checked into a newer hotel, and as you said, they had the keyless entry. And here's the question. Here's how I want to phrase it. So at Marriott hotels, typically they, when you check in at the desk, and if you check in at the desk and they, ask, can we help you? It's your first time here. And it feels very scripted, even to the point they walk around from behind the desk to hand you your key, which on one hand is nice. On the other hand, is there value there? So there's an interesting balance between technology and automation and that personal touch. Now, the latest hotel, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, the newer hotel, keyless entry, didn't have to stop at the front desk. Even the elevator, that had a lock, you had to have your key card to get up. You walked into the elevator, and the app knew you were in the elevator. You just hit a button, and it unlocked the elevator, got you up to your floor. That was very convenient. And so think about the guests coming, traveling, tired, just want to get to the room. Is there something there? Now, let me give you another experience from a few years ago now. Same kind of thing, checked in, key, got to the room. My wife was with me. And we went out for a late lunch. Came back, and on the credenza was just a small tray, nice tray, with a small, something like that, cake on it. And it happened to be my birthday. And there was a note card with it. And I opened the note card. I looked at it. It looked handwritten. I even, to the point, I held it up to the light, and I'm convinced to this day it was handwritten, not printed. And that was fascinating to me. And I've talked about that experience in a lot of different places. But here's what's most fascinating to me: that hotel had a process in place using technology to engage with a different way with a guest coming into the hotel. I have no illusions that they baked that little, 2-bite cake for me. They were sitting in the kitchen. They probably knew my birthday from the loyalty program I had with that hotel. But somehow they knew I checked in. They got the card, or somebody picked up the card or wrote the card, picked it up, put it with the cake, got it up to my room, and left it there. That's making complexity simple. That's customer obsession. That's a different way to engage. Now, I know that doesn't happen. You don't have a birthday every time you check in, but what other things, could you do in your establishment to make your guests feel, welcome? So it's a combination. I don't believe technology replaces people, and I believe technology can enhance the experience that the guest has in a hotel.
Yeah, and those are the moments that will stay with you. You may forget what the hotel room looked like, but that experience and that moment, that memory will stay with you for a long time. I have an example which I will never forget, because of, even though I've traveled and I lived in hotels sometime,
Yeah.
and I used to stay. I worked in my position in development with the hotel company, and so I didn't stay in our own branded hotels, but I stayed in another
Hmm.
hotel. And so we have been traveling with my wife, coming from Europe then, and then we decided to have room service the next morning. And to my surprise, they brought the breakfast, and to my surprise, the room service waiter brought a kind of a fruit smoothie, because they noticed normally when I have breakfast, I eat some particular fruits which I like,
Yeah.
and they hadn't paid it. They have noticed this, so said, "Well, called me Mr. Ruttman. So, Mr. Ruttman, I thought we noticed that you like what is it, papaya or pineapple and passion fruit and mangosteen, and so we created this shot for you to make your day with full of vitamins. So let us know what you think about it, and we will probably put it on the room service menu."
Perfect. What a great
I mean,
example, right? One,
yeah, and so
they knew, they paid attention to what you did, and again, the automation or the technology is they had a system to be able to actually implement that or do something with that information.
yeah, exactly. Good. I just read something I thought I want to ask your opinion about. Nowadays, there's a talk about regenerative leadership, about leading with your brain, but also with your heart, your soul, and your gut. Do you see that this applies the way Amazon runs their company? Because it's like a buzzword now in the industry.
Yeah. So here's how I would say it. I think there are some people who would say Amazon doesn't. Um, I think they do. Um, and there's this interesting balance between growth, profitability, and people. And again, I'll go back to that 1997 letter. A third area that Bezos talked about there is employees. And he said employees are going to be the key to Amazon being successful. And there's been certainly some questions about fulfillment center workers and how they're treated and some of those kinds of things. I will say that probably those workers were tasked with being faster, and it's a hard place to work. And that may be one of the downsides of that customer obsession piece. And at the same time, before Bezos left as CEO, he instituted two new leadership principles at Amazon, both revolving around employees. One was that Amazon will be the safest place for an employee to work, and two, Amazon will be the best place for employees to work. And so it takes some time to shift, but I think they are making a concerted effort to add more humanity into the conveyor belt of packages that flow through, certainly fulfillment centers.
Yeah.
Whether they're successful or not, we'll see. But I think they certainly are trying to be trying to put focus on that aspect of business.
Very good, Steve. Well, thank you very much. It has been a very interesting discussion, and I learned actually when I was preparing for this discussion with you. It gave me. It's like I was going back to college and studying about a great company, and you were my mentor or teacher in
Yeah.
this sense. So it's really appreciated. But I think there are many people who are sharing my fascination of what you're doing. So if people how can they find you about your activities, and if they want to send you get more information, how can they do so? You have an email or web link
Yep.
or LinkedIn, or how can they connect with
Yeah.
you?
So a couple ways. The first is the website for the book is thebezosletters.com. And there's some other information there, about the book, etc. And then my primary platform is LinkedIn. So Steve Anderson Insurance or Steve Anderson Bezos Letters, you should be able to find me pretty easily in both of those. Let me know, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, let me know you heard me here, and I'll be happy to connect with you and answer any questions you might have.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you joining today's episode, and so thanks for all the fantastic insights. Thanks for joining us this week on The Social Hotelier Show. Make sure to visit our website, The Social Hotelier Show, blueberry.net, where you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or via RSS, so you never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we appreciate a rating in Apple Podcast. Or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that will help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.